Yeah, welcome to S2N IAS Academy, Indian Polity class number 4 by me, Ravikant Sharma. So, my sincere request to all students for today's class is today I will go a little slow because the all other acts till Government of India Act 1947 are very important. Government of India Act 1919, 1935, and Indian Independence Act of 1947. These three are very important. That's why I discuss MCQs of these three acts in some other lecture. So if you want to take any screenshot or if you want to note down any important points, you can note down. If you want any clarifications, you can raise now itself because I mean, when I am doing with 1919 Act, at the end of 1919 Act, you can ask any question because these three are very important. At the same time, the two current affairs which I am doing today also very important, not only for 2024, even for future aspects because those two topics are very important. So please be focused. Please take down the notes or screenshot, whatever it may be, and please ask the doubts because this class is not only important for polity, even for modern India, post-independence, ethics, social justice, and I say also. Okay. The Government of India Act of 1919 is act also known as Montfort Reforms. Look at the picture. He is Mr. Montague, the Secretary of State at the time of 1919. He is Mr. Chelmsford, Viceroy of India at the time of 1919. So, coming to the first point, the British government chartered this act to further expand the participation of Indians in the government of India. From 1861, the portfolio system, ordinance making system, and making Indians part of the executive councils, legislative councils of British India. At the time of 1919, this proportion of participation of Indians in the Indian administration is very much increased. The act was recommended by the Edwin Montagu, the Secretary of State for India at the time of 1919, and Lord Chelmsford, Viceroy and Governor General of India. Hence, this act was also known as Montagu-Chelmsford Reforms or simply Montfort Reforms. The most notable feature of the act was end of benevolent despotism and introduction of responsible government in India. Yesterday, I already told the concept called white man's burden. The end benevolent despotism concept also similar to the white man's burden concept. In this concept, the ruler, for suppose here Mr. Chelmsford, the Viceroy of India, feels himself as a superior than the subjects, like subjects means Indians. So the authoritarian head of the state feels himself as superior than the subjects and he want to brainwash, he want to liberate, he want to civilize his subjects by his administration. That kind of thinking is called benevolent despotism. From the benevolent despotism to the introduction of responsible government in India, the attitude of Britishers was changed. Why? Because meanwhile, from 1861 to 1919, Indian National Congress was established and Congress was becoming more and more powerful. More Indians were educating. More reforms movement like Savitribai Phule, Jyotibai Phule, and Brahma Samaj, Arya Samaj, these kind of initiatives, reform movements within Hinduism, Muslim religion, Jain, Sikhs, in every religion becoming reforming. Indians are becoming educated and they are asking for their own rights in a peaceful manner. That's why the Britishers was of opinion to give some proportion of the power to the Indians. Background of the Act: on 20th August 1917, Montagu, the Secretary of State, made a historic declaration in the British House of Commons, British Parliament. It is called Montagu Declaration. We already studied that Montagu, who is the Secretary of State, is member of British cabinet. That way, all his announcements were first done in the land of England. So, in the British House of Commons, British House of Commons means in India it is a Lok Sabha. Montagu opened his declaration called Montfort Reforms. The theme of the declaration was increasing the association of Indians in every branch of the administration and gradual development of self-governing institutions in India. And one more point why he announces all these things in the British House of Commons is the first point is he's part of British cabinet. And the second point is when you announce something in England, the international media, representatives, and world body leaders, etc., will be present. So there they can create a false image in the international media that we are doing something democratic, we are building up democratic institutions in India, so to gain the advantage in geopolitics as well as to get the assent of the British cabinet and the British house, British monarchy family, he announced it in the land of Britain. India to remain as an integral part of British Empire. Even though they want to see responsible government in India, according to them, the responsible government to India means the responsible government towards the British Crown. Gradual decentralization of authority with loosening the supreme hold of the central government. Thus, this act suggested for a decentralized government. First time, dear aspirants, first time we are seeing the term called decentralized government. From Regulation Act 1773, Pitt's India Act 1784, Charter Act 1813, Charter Act 1833, Charter Act 1853, Act of Good Governance 1858, Councils Act 1861, Councils Act 1909, everywhere we saw the centralization tendency, except separation of some functions like civil functions, military functions, commercial functions to the board of control and other to the board of directors, etc. First time the decentralization initiative was taken place by the Act of 1919. So whenever a MCQ comes, like the first process of decentralization started by the Government of India Act 1919. The time and manner towards the goal of responsible government to be decided by the British Parliament. Again, the British Parliament, through the Secretary of State, became a powerful authority in aspects of India. Then the Viceroy or Governor General. Partial responsibility in the provinces, but no change in the charter of the central government. Some partial responsibility in the process of decentralization of the government. Partial responsibilities were given to the provinces, but major portion the central government is occupying the power chair. Features of the Act: it relaxed the central control over the provinces by demarcating and separating the central and provincial subjects. The aspirants, demarcating and separating the central and provincial subjects. In present day constitution, we see the state list, union list, and concurrent list. The roots of these three lists was in the Act of 1919. The central and provincial legislatures were authorized to make the laws on their respective list of subjects. However, the structure of the government continued to be centralized and unitary. Even though some functions were delegated to the local administration, the provincial administrations, but majorly the unitary tendency or centralized tendency of the British administration remained the constant. Even today, the unitary features, the centralized tendencies can be observed during natural disasters like COVID time, emergency times, etc. It introduced a diarchy for provincial governments. Yeah. When the system of diarchy, I think senior aspirants know the value of the term called diarchy. It will continuously in the list of UPSC keywords. The concept called diarchy means subjects will be divided into reserved subjects and transferred subjects. Generally, the common subjects like health, education, and welfare of the municipalities, etc., will be in the transferred subjects. The main subjects like revenue, finance, defense will be under the reserved subjects. So, dividing the concepts into transferred subjects and reserved subjects in the name of diarchy was introduced by the 1919 Act. The transferred subjects were administered by the governor with the aid of the ministers responsible to the legislative council. So, legislative council will be there, and portfolio system was already introduced in 1861. So, ministers will be there to give aid and advice to the governor only on the matters of transferred subjects. Here, Aid and advice given by the Council of Ministers is not like today's. On those days, aid and advice means aid and advice only. The ultimate authority will be the governor. Only in a few aspects, minister's advice on the governor will be binding. But today, aid and advice means whatever the ministers think, governor should accept it. Otherwise, he can ask for reconsideration. In the second time, he need to follow that. So that is the difference between today's aid and advice and that day's aid and advice. So my point is governor is limited to only transferred subjects and reserved subjects are still vested in the central government. The reserved subjects, on the other hand, have to be administered by the governor and his executive council without being responsible to the legislative council. So reserved subjects also dealt by the governor, but with the executive council. Here, transferred subjects will be administered by the governor with the legislative council. See the difference. Legislative council means directly or indirectly some direct representation from the people to the government of British is there in legislative council, but the direct people mandate is going to administer only simple subjects called transferred subjects. Executive council, which is mostly the nominated body, is undertaking the reserved subjects, the crucial subjects like revenue, defense, law and order, etc., etc. So still the process of democracy is like a toddler at the time of 1919. This dual scheme of governance was known as diarchy, which means double rule. However, this experiment was largely unsuccessful. Aspirants, how it will be a successful? In the name of democracy, you are encouraging the anarchy, nomination, the self-man, the puppets, by giving the name called executive council, and you are expecting simple subjects like sanitation, water, municipal administration, etc., etc., are transferred to governor. And again, governor is there. Legislative council will just give aid and advice to the governor, and you want to see the success of democracy. So it's highly impossible. But still, the Act of 1919 was cornerstone for demarcating the subjects like central list, state list, etc., etc., and transfer of powers to the local authorities. In these two aspects, this act paved way for the future democratic institution building in India. Diarchy. We need to know more about diarchy because it is even important in answer writing in state PCS exams and other central exams also. So by looking at the subjects, transferred subjects, tick mark. This is governor, state governor with legislative council, and reserved subjects, the governor deals with his executive council. Diarchy was a gradual transition from irresponsible to the responsible government, and thus provincial subjects were divided into reserved and transferred subjects. The intent behind the white-skinned British man was that from irresponsible, disordered government to the responsible government, the central government want to take care. The central government want to monitor the each and every step of transition. That's why they don't want to transfer the important subjects all of a sudden. So they kept important subjects in the name of transfer subjects, and the subjects which are easy to administer, easy to suit for the local needs, they transferred to the local governments. So they want to gradually shift the power. That's why the concept called diarchy was free. The members in control of the reserved subjects be made responsible to the British Parliament through Secretary of State, because revenue and law and order, these functions are very, very crucial. So the grip of London governments, the dominance of London government, or the monitoring of London government on these important subjects was exercised by Secretary of State. Subjects which were considered of key importance, like maintaining peace and order in the state, were classified as reserved, because if the peace and order in the state is in disorder stage or it is in disturbed stage, British control or British power over the territory will vanish. If the power over the territory is vanished, everything is going to be vanished. So they don't want to take any choice over law and order. That's why direct monitoring of Secretary of State, even from London, is on the subjects called reserved subjects. And the subjects in which were more local interests they were transferred to the local people, because if the subjects are in local interest like sanitation, water, drinking water, health, etc., etc., local people can take care, and there is no burden for British people also. It introduced for the first time bicameralism in the central government. We observed two things. The lists were divided into union list and state list. Bicameralism was there, and partial transfer of power from central government to state government. These three important provisions you need to understand and you need to remember till the end of the selection process. And also the concept of diarchy. Everyone tells about diarchy, but no one tells about why the system of diarchy was introduced. This is called studying the philosophy or background behind any act. So two houses were introduced at the central level, upper house and lower house, Council of States and Legislative Assembly. In today's Council of States is Rajya Sabha, Legislative Assembly means Lok Sabha. It introduced for the first time the concept of direct elections in the country. Till 1909 Act, indirect elections were in place, but now we observe direct elections in the country, but it was less than 10% of the population utilized it due to some restrictions we will see in future slides. The majority of the members of the both houses were chosen by direct elections. It extended the principle of communal representation by providing some separate electorate for Sikhs, Christians, Anglo-Indians, and Europeans. Dear aspirants, by 1909, separate electorates were proposed only for Hindus and Muslims, but by the end of 1919, Sikhs, Christians, Anglo-Indians, and Europeans were also in place. Please remember the names. I think it seems to be very silly and simple, but people will put mistakes while choosing MCQs. Sikhs, Christians, Anglo-Indians, and Europeans, Muslims are also there. It required that there are 3 of the 6 members of the Viceroy Council should be Indians. So out of 6 members, 3 members should be compulsorily from India in Viceroy's Executive Council, not Legislative Council, Executive Council. It granted franchise to limited number of people on the basis of property, tax, and education. I already told direct elections were conducted, but the number of voters were very, very limited. That voters were on the basis of the universal adult suffrage in today's terminology. In those days terminology, limited franchise, because only limited people will be there based on property, tax, and education. These three terms should be noted down, because MCQs will make you confused by changing the order of these terms: property, tax, or education. Property, tax, or education. There was no universal franchise and adult suffrage. The qualifications were very, very restrictive in nature. Still, British people wants to allow only those persons who are in favor of them. Look at the criteria: property, tax, or education. Property means the rich people. Tax paying people means the government employees. Education means the educated people who are educated in the universities of British India, not in nationalist educational institutions or madrasas or any other gurukulas. Because the rich people, the government employees, the students, these 3 sections will be obedient or faithful to the British people in one way or other way. So these 3 people will elect the persons who are more moderate in outlook, who are more liberal, who are more soft-spoken in nature. So there will be no problem for a British officials, British leadership in councils and legislature and executive with the soft-spoken Indians. So that's why they deliberately chosen these 3 things are the criteria for the franchise. It created a new office of High Commissioner for India in London and transferred to them to some of the functions which were previously performed by the Secretary of State. Dear aspirants, once again, this post called High Commissioner for India, this paved the way for future diplomacy in India. That is, Indian foreign services the diplomats, the high commissioners were placed in several parts of the world. So 1919 Act was the stepping stone for this Indian diplomacy. But High Commissioner for India in London is once again a tactic to divert the attention of international media and to make them feel that Britishers are trying their level best to establish democracy in India. They choose London as the first place. But that doesn't matter. It was useful for India in future diplomacy perspective. India is having one of the strongest diplomatic staffs in the world in present days. The soft power of Indian diplomacy is doing very good job under the leadership of President Foreign Affairs Minister Mr. S. Jaishankar, and India is signing several MOUs with other foreign nations in today's administration. We can observe the foundation of today's success of diplomacy in the 1919 Act. It provided for the establishment of a Public Service Commission. The aspirants in the UPSC, Union Public Service Commission, TSPC, Telangana State Public Service Commission, APPSC, all these public service commissions, the foundation of the institute called Public Service Commission was there in 1919. Hence, Central Public Service Commission was established in 1926, followed by the other provincial service commissions to recruit the civil servants of the state and country. This was done on the recommendations of the Lee Commission on Superior Civil Services in India. Yeah, the process of recruitment of civil services was done on the name of Lee Commission. The term Lee Commission is very, very important for the MCQs in modern history. It separated for the first time provincial budget from the central budget and authorized the provincial legislatures to enact their own budget. Very, very important. Delegation of powers to the provincial governments means the power means what, my dear friends? Power means only two things: the police power, the finance power. The finance power already delegated to the provincial subjects. So they can contribute some amount of their ideas in the making of provincial budget. The budget was to be divided into two categories: votable and non-votable. Some portion of the budget can be votable and some portion of the budget is not votable. Means the votable budget, if it gets defeated, they need to introduce it again with certain amendments. The non-votable portion of the budget is no need to be modified. Here, the votable items covered only 1/3 of the total expenditure, and even in this sphere, Governor General was empowered to refuse or grant any funds. So out of 100 rupees, only 33 rupees will be under votable expenditure. Still, if the legislature is not agreeing with the sanctions given in the votable budget, still the Governor General can veto it and he can refuse or he can grant any funds irrespective of the share. So only a setup, only a framework was given to the external world that we are giving rights, voting rights on the budget, but in reality, everything was under the control of Governor General and the British Crown. It provided for the appointment of statutory commission to inquire into and report on its working after 10 years of the Act coming into the force. So Act coming into force in 1919, but interestingly, Simon Commission should visit India in 1927, but in the hurry of change of government, the government may collapse in next elections, they may not regain the power. So the party which was in power in 1927, two years earlier, Simon Commission was landed into the India, and the rest of the things, in modern history, Lala Lajpat Rai, Lathi Charge, the law and order situation in India, etc., etc. The history behind Simon Commission. On November 1927, British government announced the appointment of a 7-member statutory commission under the chairmanship of Sir John Simon to report on the condition of India under its new constitution. Because the Act of 1919 was very much unique than the previous acts because it handed over some functions to the provincial government. It given some authority on the budget to the provincial governments. It established a state public service commission, union public service commission, and it established a high commission in London. The powers of Secretary of State were delegated to some Indians, and 50% of the Viceroy's executive council is now occupied with Indians. So many changes which were not seen, which were not imagined in the last 100 years, 150 years were in reality in Government of India Act of 1919. So they need to review, they need to take feedback from the subjects in India. However, all the parties boycotted this commission because all the members of the commission were British. They want to take feedback from India. For that, at least one member among the five members should be from India. Yes, they can choose their faithful, their obedient, their what we call the listeners in the committee, but they never tried to place any black, any brown, any Indian in the white men's committee. So all parties, from right wing to left wing, socialist, Naxalite, everyone boycotted the British. The commission submitted its report in 1930 and recommended the abolition of diarchy, reserved subject, transferred subject, etc., etc. It is okay in 1919, but today it is 1930. Indians are matured enough, so you can dilute the provision called diarchy. Extension of the responsible government in provinces and establishment of a federation of British India and princely states. So they are proposing an interesting proposal called establishment of federation of British India and princely states. To consider the proposals of this commission, three roundtable conferences were held with the representatives of British government, British India, and Indian princely states. Three roundtable conferences were held, but Indian National Congress, represented by Mahatma Gandhi, was participated in only one roundtable conference. And any one of you, please tell me the number, whether it is first roundtable conference or second roundtable conference or third roundtable conference in which Mahatma Gandhi participated. Please. Yeah. Chapani?
Second roundtable conference.
Yes, correct. Exactly. Mahatma Gandhi, who is represented by the Congress, participated in only one roundtable conference, that is second roundtable conference. And one man is there. His name is Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar. Participated in almost all three roundtable conferences. Yeah. Yes, correct, Andy. Baba Sahib Ambedkar participated in all three roundtable conferences. With this wide experience on Indian politics, Indian affairs of the democracy, Baba Sahib Ambedkar became the chairman of draft committee of Indian Constitution. Yeah. On the basis of these discussions, a white paper on constitutional reforms was prepared and the recommendations were incorporated in the Government of India Act of 1935. Dear aspirants, if you observe, the Act of 1919 is result of the acts from Regulation of 70, Regulation Act of 1773 to Indian Councils Act of 1909. So all this bunch of 6-7 acts were in the form of 1919 Act, and the 1919 Act was the basis for the Simon Commission. The working of 1919 Act was the basis for Simon Commission, and Simon Commission report was basis for the roundtable conferences, and the white paper out of the roundtable conferences was the basis for the Government of India Act 1935, and Government of India Act 1935 was the main base for the today's constitution. So directly or indirectly, the Government of India Act 1919 was very important for our present day polity. The roots of present day polity were the reflection of 1919 Act. Most of us think that Government of India Act 1935 influenced us very good amount of very good amount of the influence is there in 1935 Act. But if you deeply examine all these consequences, the Government of India Act 1919 was as much important as Government of India Act 1935. So analysis of the Act, most of the things we already discussed. This Act intended to give responsible government by the form of creation of diarchy in provinces. Yeah. However, the introduction of diarchy in the provinces was too complicated and it provided to a failure. It extended and consolidated communal representation because separate electorate was there for only two religions till 1909, but now 4, 5 other categories were also added. So the more communalism, the more divide and rule policy was in place. Because the aspirants, if we observe the attitude of British, whenever we feel that some democratic institutions like UPSC, TSPSC, etc., came into picture, division of functions, division of powers, etc., budget, just terms seems to be very diplomatic, very democratic. But in the bottom line, the communal hatred, the divide and rule policy, the riots, the religious riots between Hindus and Muslims, Hindus and Christians, Hindus and other sections of the people. So the more these democratic institutions penetrating into the India, the more education penetrating into India, at the same amount of communal hatred, divide and rule policy, class conflicts, caste conflicts were in place. If you synchronize Indian polity with modern Indian history, whenever a new reform, new act is coming to the picture, in between that gap of 10, 20 years, more revolts, more anger, more resentment, more police oppression you can see. So you need to synchronize the modern Indian history along with the polity to understand what the idea of India means. Why today Indians are behaving like this? Why some politicians, some political parties in India still with the colonial mindset and the same attitude you can observe from the by deeply studying the Indian polity and modern Indian history. Though it provided direct elections in the franchise, is very limited and did not extend to the common man. The governor generals and governors had a lot of power to undermine the legislature, the center, and the provinces, respectively. Even today, in some aspects, like appointing a chief minister, dismissing the council of ministers, and imposing president rules, in some aspects, governors are still powerful. In the case of New Delhi, the administrator or lieutenant governor is very, very powerful than the any other state of India. So you can take the example of Delhi governor as a live example of the day's legacy. Though the objective of the act was to move towards responsible government, in reality, there was an absence of responsible government at the center. It is quite clear the responsible government, the democratic government, all these things will be in the name of words, in the name of paper, but in reality, monarchy, uh, dominance, and racism, the superior thinking of white man is the reality. However, there was some merits with this act as well as it marked the end of the policy of benevolent despotism. Some form of elections, it created political controversy among the Indians. Yes, we should recognize that some form of the elections, at least 10% of the Indians are going to vote, even though they are landlords, even though they are educated people, even though they are servants of the company. But the process of elections started in the India. Bicameral legislation, this is very, very important, a very, very good step, because there is only Lok Sabha, no checks and balances will be there. So Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, upper house and lower house, the Council of States gives representation to the states. So this is also a very, very good step according to 1999 Act. There was increased participation of Indians in the administration. The sum of important portfolios like health industry and labor were assigned to the Indians. Dear aspirants, here the term labor. By the Act of 1919, the portfolio called labor portfolio is assigned to India. That's why in 1990s, Indian trade union movements you can see in modern Indian history. So whenever the fellow Indian is in charge of labor portfolio, the other Indians, the other labor leaders felt that it is the right time to start labor unions in India. In 1920s, labor movements in India started. Even in health and industry, whenever a fellow Indian is occupying the chair of industry minister, the local industries in Maharashtra, in Gujarat, in Rajasthan, the Western India, Punjab, many industries were started at the time of 1920s. So my honest request to all of you is synchronize modern Indian history preparation with Indian polity preparation. It will help you a lot. Yeah, welcome to the Government of India Act of 1935. Very, very, very important for modern history, Indian polity, social justice, essay, and ethics also. Because this will be the as like 42nd Constitutional Amendment of 1976 is mini constitution for today's constitution. The Government of India Act 1935 also we can call it as unofficially we can call it as a mini constitution because most of the provisions are still in force. Government of India Act 1935. It is very easy to study Government of India Act 1935 because still we are following most of the provisions. The philosophy, the background behind this act was Ramsay MacDonald's announcement, the scheme of representation for minorities. See, dear aspirants, the feeling of communal divide, minority appeasement politics, majority minority divide is still strengthening from 1992 to 1935, which came to be known as Communal Award. The award itself called Communal Award. The award not only continued to separate electorate for Muslims, Sikhs, Indian Christians, Anglo-Indians, European, but also extended to the depressed classes of the society called Dalits are today's SCSTs. So the conspiracy of separating Dalits from the mainstream Hindus started itself in 1935. You can observe in social media slogans like Jai Bhim, Jai Me. Jai Bhim means the SCST and Bojan people, Dalits, and Jai Meme means Muslims. So equating the problems of minorities in India with the Dalits of India to separate them from mainstream Hinduism, the biggest conspiracy started by the British were roots in Government of India Act 1935. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhiji was so much distressed with this act because we know that Gandhiji was the hardcore follower of Bhagavad Gita and he was the preacher of equality. He did a lot for the upliftment of Harijans and Dalits. So he undertook fast unto death in the Eravada jail to get the award modified. At last, there was an agreement between the leaders of Congress and depressed classes headed by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, which came to known as Pune Pact. If you observe newspapers, seminars and lectures in Hyderabad, Vijayawada and bigger cities, in the month of August, some debates, discussions happens on the Pune Pact by the Dalit organizations because the Pune Pact itself changed the course of Indian politics. It gave reservations to the Dalits in the legislative assemblies, councils, etc., etc. It should be noted that the Act of 1935 provided separate representation for the wide section of Indian and thus created a serious hurdle in the way of building up the national unity. So, till 1935, people felt only that problem is with Hindus and Muslims, etc., etc. But their own people called Dalits in SCST communities, government want to separate them from the mainstream Hindus, though. So the problem of communal divide is becoming more and more wide. Background of the act: the act derived material from four sources: report of Simon Commission, discussion on roundtable conference, white paper of 1933, the report of Joint Selection Committee. So, except the report of Joint Selection Committee, all these three reports were based on the 1919 Act of Government of India Act. So that's why I place 1919 Act and 1935 Act in equal place. Yeah. If you look at the slide, the report of Joint Selection Committee. So Joint Selection Committee of the Parliament is that much important in 1935. That's why even in current affairs, if you observe the Adani issue, the opposition parties are demanding for JPC. The same Joint Selection Committee was as much prominent as these days in 1935. Features of the Act: this Act proposed an All India Federation consisting of provinces and princely states as a individual units, but this was not realized. The Act created federal and provincial autonomy by dividing the powers between the center and units in terms of the list: federalist, provincial list, and concurrent list. Till 1919, only federal list and provincial list was there, but by the time of 1935, concurrent list also come into the picture. The same three lists are still in place. While under all the previous acts, the government of India was treated as a unitary, this act prescribed a federation taking the provisions and Indian states as the individual units. In all previous acts, Government of India was treated as a unitary, one single unit. But from now, Indian states were going to be treated as individual units. So provincial autonomy become more and more reality, more and more practical in nature, because federalist is there, province list is there, concurrent list also there. So more functions were delegated to the provincial governments. It abolished the diarchy in provinces. We can observe in Simon Commission report, it recommended to abolish the diarchy because Indians are good enough mature to deal with the subjects. So no need to separate reserved subjects and keep monitoring from London by the Secretary of State. So diarchy was abolished, which was considered to be a failure of the 1919 Act, and it introduced the provincial autonomy in the place of diarchy. We can appreciate the Britishers' step in abolishing hierarchy and giving provincial autonomy, but it is very, very too late. The residuary powers were given to the Viceroy, which is the unique characteristics of the Act. Even though this Act is vocal of provincial autonomy, still the residuary powers were vested with the Viceroy. It provided for the adoption of diarchy at the center. Consequently, the federal subjects were divided into reserve subjects and transfer subjects. However, this provision of the Act do not came into the operation at all. It is very interesting, and it is very, laughable thing that the concept which was failed in provincial level, they want to impose it in the central level. This was the maturity levels of the British people, but however, it was not in operational at all. I think the British Crown felt that by implementing diarchy at center, they can control the entire center at a time. They can give a false impression that we are giving means autonomy at the provincial level, but indirectly they can control the entire country. But it was not at all operational. Yeah. It introduced bicameralism in 6 out of 11 provinces. Dear aspirants, we observed bicameralism at central legislation in the time of 1919 Act, but the time of 1935, 6 out of 11 provinces, majority provinces were under bicameralism. So state governments also seeing the fruits of bicameralism at the end of 1935. Bengal, Bombay, Madras, Bihar, Assam, and the UP provinces were under the bicameralism, but too many restrictions were placed on them. No problem. If the bicameral is introduced with the restrictions, future the restrictions will be shadowed and bicameralism will be existed. Bicameralism will be existed. The provincial autonomy. The provincial autonomy means two things. The provincial government is wholly responsible to the provincial legislature. Yes, till now, provincial government is indirectly responsible to the viceroy because of the some inherent dominance of the central government. Some subjects were given as reserved subjects. So from now, provincial governments are wholly responsible to the provincial legislature, which were elected bodies from now as with the limited franchise. So some responsible government is there. It was free from outside control and interference in the large amount of matters. So it is free from outside control. Now the governments at provincial levels are mostly 60 to 70% are responsible to the state government itself. However, the degree of the autonomy was introduced at the provincial level was subjected to important limitations. The provincial governors retained important reserve powers. Till now, Viceroy retained the powers. Now the provincial governors are retained the powers. So it doesn't make any sense, but still some framework was in place. The powers of the governor to act in his own discretion was laid down in 1935 Act. Through this, it can be said that the Act of 1935 retained the control of central government over the provinces through governor. What happening today was the basis of 1935 Act. Yeah. It further extended the principle of communal representation by providing separate electorate for depressed classes, which we observed in the first side of this act itself. Women and labor were also given the separate electorates, which is very, very important. It abolished the Council of India established by the Government of India 1858. Council of India was abolished. This was established to assist the Secretary of State for India. So more responsible governments are there at the provincial level itself. So there is no need of any big central institute to advise the Secretary of the State for India, because the role of Secretary of State for India itself will be reduced if the responsible governments were there at the central and state levels in India. It extended franchise. About 10% of the total population got the voting rights. So in 1919 Act itself, I said around 10% representation was there, but at the time it was very less than 10%. Even till the 1935 Act, the representation was amounting to 10% of the total population. It provided for the establishment of Reserve Bank of India. Federal Court means today's Supreme Court. So the Reserve Bank of India and Federal Court means the Supreme Court, the updated Supreme Court of today's Supreme Court, not that regulating acts 1773 Supreme Court. That Supreme Court was purely related to the affairs of the company. This Supreme Court is the constitutional court. So in 1919 Act, we observed the Union Public Service Commission and transfer of powers to the provinces and bicameralism. And by 1935 Act, the institutions like Reserve Bank of India and Supreme Court were in place, the federal court. This federal court was given exclusive original jurisdiction to decide the disputes between center and the constituent units. So the disputes between center and states, we know it is called as original jurisdiction. This power was given to the federal court. It provided for the establishment of not only a federal public service commission, but also a provincial public service commission and joint public service commission. In 1919 Act, we observed the Union Public Service Commission, that is Federal Public Service Commission, but Provincial Public Service Commission and Joint Public Service Commission for 2 or more states were reality at the end of 1935. This is a broad analysis of the Act. Analysis of the Act includes the already discussed subjects in the Act, but it gives an analytical view. So please observe the terminology in the analysis of the Act. You can use it directly in the answer writing. The proposal for setting up Federation of India did not materialize. That is, the federation envisaged by the 1935 Act never came into the being because provinces and the princely states were put in same place. If you want to start Federation of India, provinces and the princely states were given equal importance. This was not liked by the princely state kings. They wanted to treat the princely state with a separate treatment. That's why this not become into reality. This is because of the federation described in this act took into consideration of the provinces and the Indian states as the individual units, but it was optional for the Indian states to join the federation. And since no ruler, obviously, if you give option to join or not to join, no ruler want to join in the federation. The provincial, even after 1947, Government of India used some force and pressurized some princely states to join in India, but still some princely states kings were rebelliant or resistant towards joining into the Indian Union. Then by the pressure itself, they are not ready to join. How can you expect they join voluntarily into the federation? The provincial autonomy was an important concept of the act and it came into the effect since April 1937, but it got discontinued in 1939 itself because Britishers cannot loosen their dominance. Of course, by the pressure of Indian National Congress and other patriotic organizations, they gave provincial autonomy in 1935 Act. It came into the force in April 1937, but within 2 years, provincial autonomy concept was discarded, federation was not realized. Also, the governor of the provinces got the power to act in his discretion without adhering to the ministerial advice in certain matters. This power gave the central government to indulge the matters of the provinces. Central government can use the governor as its agent, and in the name of discretion, he can dismantle all the democratic setup which was established by the previous acts. Some parts of the act, like the federal bank, federal court, serve as the foundation for the RBI in Supreme Court and post independence. Yes, we already discussed it. Another significant aspect of this act is the division of legislative powers into three lists: union list, concurrent list, and state list. The idea behind this division was responsible for the later constitution. This point also discussed. It is to be noted that dominion status, which was promised by the Simon Commission in 1929, was not conferred by the Government of India Act 1935. In later stage, we can observe the Lahore Resolution, the Purna Swaraj movement, etc., etc., after publishing the Government of India Act 1935, because Congress was being cheated by the Britishers, because they promised dominion status in the August offer itself, but it was not coming to the reality. The act was obstructing the development of the nation of India, and therefore Jawaharlal Nehru called it as mission with all brakes, no engine. Yes, Jawaharlal Nehru was correct, because they envisaged federation. The federation was not happened in reality, and they expected to give provincial autonomy. That also not coming to the force. So the two main eyes of the Government of India Act failed. So mission with all brakes and no engine is a perfect title for the 1935 Act. Please note down this quotation. Jawaharlal Nehru called 1935 Act as a mission with all brakes, no engine. Critically analyze or explain. These kind of questions you can expect in the exams. Yeah. And welcome to the Indian Independence Act of 1947, the last act in the historical evolution of Indian Constitution, but very, very important with respect to the transition provisions from 1947 to 1952. From 1947 to 1952, the Government of India Act 1935 plus Indian Independence Act 1947 were the guiding principles in administration of India. These two acts as the constitution for the India in transition period. Yeah. Background of the act: on February 20, 1947, British Prime Minister Clement Attlee declared that the British rule in India would end by the June 30, 1948. But more than 1 year in advance, we got independence. British people are very hurried to leave India, because it became impossible them to organize India into a country. Other hands, the seeds of communal hatred which they saw by 1919 Act, 1909 Act, 1935 Act, and before acts. So the divide between Hindus and Muslims is very, very visible. The demand of Pakistan is at its peak stage in the northwestern province. Of course, the Muslim League got very, very less number in elections, but in ground, they have good mass following among the Muslims. Again, on June 3rd, 1947, the British government made it clear that any constitution framed by the Constitutional Assembly of India cannot apply to the parts of India which were unwilling to accept it. It aspirants, the divide and rule policy, the hypocrisy of white men is still visible by these statements, because with this statement, it's only Jammu and Kashmir headache was still existence in India. They never imposed or they never pressurized the other Indian territories to accept the constitution framed by the Constitutional Assembly of India, but they made it voluntary and it created chaos in India. On the same day, the partition plan was put forward by the Lord Mountbatten, which is known as the Mountbatten Plan. Lord Mountbatten was given a hurriest task. The administration in England requested him to finish the Mountbatten Plan as earlier as possible to reduce the damage to the British government. So he was in hurry. In that hurry mode itself, Indian Independence Act of 1947 passed. Features of the Act: it ended the British rule in India and India as independent and sovereign state from the 15th August 1947. creation of India and Pakistan dominions was the reality. It abolished the office of viceroy and provided for each dominion a governor general. For India, a governor general, and Pakistan, a governor general. Lord Mountbatten acted as the first governor general of India, but Pakistan doesn't want to see a Britisher as the Governor General of India. So Muhammad Ali Jinnah himself assumed the office of Governor General for Pakistan. The authority of British Crown over the princely state ceased, and they were free to join either India or Pakistan. This was a basic problem for the Hyderabad state, Jammu and Kashmir, and Junagadh. But fortunately, by the efforts of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel ji, the Junagadh and Hyderabad state become part and parcel of India. But the Jammu and Kashmir problem is still existent, and the Supreme Court, Honorable Supreme Court of India, reserved its verdict on the restoration of Article 370. His Majesty's government has have no responsibility with respect to the government of India and Pakistan. They doesn't take any responsibility in past also, but officially by 1947 Act, they are giving up their responsibility towards India. It created two constituent assemblies for the countries of India and Pakistan to frame and adopt any constitution for the respected nations and to repeal any act of the British Parliament. So it is obvious that Britishers are living in India and they want to put power in the hands of responsible people. So the old acts can be repealed and new acts can be enacted. It abolished the office of Secretary of State. Once again, this office will be rubbish because they want to give freedom to India. So there is no need of any bridge between London and Delhi. So the office of Secretary of State of India is abolished and transferred his power to the Secretary of the Commonwealth Affairs because Britishers still want to unite their colonies in the name called under the name called Commonwealth Affairs. What are Commonwealth states? Commonwealth states are nothing but the colonies of British, the then British. It provided for the partition of Punjab and Bengal and set boundary commission to demarcate the boundaries between them. And then this guy called Sir Cyril Radcliffe, who don't know the Indian geography, who came to India like a holiday spot between just 2 weeks before the partition and take a pencil and A4 sheet and demarcate, yes, this is the boundary of Pakistan, this is the boundary of India. Let you fight and die in the name of Hindu-Muslim religion. This was the but they give good names called boundary commission, demarcation commission, etc., etc. But in reality, Sir Cyril Radcliffe is not known about Indian geography, Indian polity. Within the 2 weeks, 1 week he felt ill. He doesn't adjust with the Indian climate. Within the 1 week, he finished the process of demarcation of the Punjab and Bengal. He just took the census of the population census of the latest population census of the Punjab and Bengal. The Hindu majority regions of Bengal were given to India. The Muslim majority regions of the Bengal given to Pakistan. The Sikh majority Punjab region of were given to India, and the Muslim dominated territories belong to Pakistan. That's it. That was the reality in unofficial language. It provided for the governance of each of the dominions and provinces by the Government of India Act 1935 till the new constitution were framed. Yeah, 1935 Act became the mini constitution from 1947 to 1951, followed by some terms and conditions in the Indian Independence Act of 1947. So Indian Independence Act of 1947 gave the authority to the Government of India 1935 to act as a mini constitution in the transition period. It deprived the British monarch of his right to veto bills or ask for the reservation of certain bills. There is no question of British monarch because they want to give up the responsibility on India. It designated the Governor General of India and provincial governors as the constitutional heads of the state. Even today, the President of India and the state governors, we call them as constitutional head of the state. They were made to act on the advice of the respective council of ministers. So now the advice of local ministers from India becomes matter. It dropped the title of Emperor of India from royal titles of the King of England. Even After enactment of Constitution of India, we banned all these titles except the titles given by the central government like Padma Bhushan, Padma Vibhushan, Bharat Ratna, etc. Analysis of the Act of 1947. 1947 Act itself, very brief, very short. In one line, we are giving up our responsibility from India. That was the summary of the Act. Anyhow, for the sake of studying it in a critical manner, we need to analyze this Act. By this Act, Crown ceased to hold any authority over India and Pakistan. Neither India nor Pakistan derived its constitutional authority from British Crown. The Governor General and provincial governors will act as the constitutional head. The Governor General and the provincial governors wants to act with the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers, means the local people, local leaders, having the confidence of the Dominion Legislature in his discretion. So the discretionary terms and the authoritative terms will be removed. Individual judgment were erased from the previous acts of the British government. Yes, the discretions, individual judgments, veto powers, etc., everything will be erased. Both the Governor General and provincial governors lost the extraordinary powers of passing ordinances, vetoing bills, reserving any bill for the consideration of the Crown. Why? Because they are leaving India very soon. So no need any ordinance, any bill, any veto, etc. From the date of August 14, 1947, it was the Constituent Assembly which was to perform the dual role of being a legislative body as well as the constituent body. From 1947 to 1951, the same Constitutional Assembly should function for framing new constitution as well as for regular day-to-day governance affairs. This is the same Constitutional Assembly of one dominion was to function as a central legislature also. Even the provincial legislatures also acts like this only. Sovereignty of the Dominion legislature was complete and no sanction of the Governor General will henceforth to be required to legislate on any matter. So the Central Constitutional Assembly become very independent. There is no interference of Governor General or any British official from the external side. This was the analysis of 1947 Act. And aftermath of independence, yes, at the time of independence, in the month of August 1947, Jinnah left for Karachi. There is no business for Jinnah in New Delhi because he achieved what he wanted. So he left for Karachi on 7th August 1947. And Pakistan National Assembly met on August 11th, 1947 and elected him as the president. On 14th, Jinnah was sworn in as the Governor General of the Pakistan. At the stroke of midnight of 14th and 15th August, means 14th August 11:55 p.m. to 5th August 12:05 a.m., India and Pakistan came into the existence. The Indian Constitutional Assembly appointed Lord Mountbatten as the Governor General of Indian Dominion because Pandit Nehru thought that if Mountbatten will stay in India for 1-2 years, any initial troubles, the starting troubles with respect to Pakistan, with respect to world and neighboring countries, will be settled down with the goodwill of Lord Mountbatten. With the stature of Lord Mountbatten, we can eradicate some starting troubles for the dominion of India. So Jawaharlal Nehru requested him to stay back for a couple of months. In the morning of August 15, 1947, a new cabinet headed by the Governor Nehru was sworn in. The Constituent Assembly of India became the Parliament of Indian Dominion. Yeah. Till now, we discussed the static portion. Today, we discussed about the Government of India Act 1919, Government of India Act 1935, and Indian Independence Act of 1947. I would like to move to the current affairs session. And before moving to the current affairs session, if anyone having any doubt with respect to these three acts can raise their doubts. Yeah, please. మన డౌట్స్ ఉన్నాయండి ఈ 3 యాక్ట్స్ మీద?
No, sir.
ఓకే, దీప్తి గారు నో చెప్పారు. ఇంకా ఎవరన్నా?
No, sir.
ఓకే. సో లెట్స్ మూవ్ టు ద కరెంట్ అఫైర్స్. Vikasit Bharat by 2047. This current affair is very important. Please take down any screenshot, photo, or take some notes, because this Vikasit Bharat 1947. Just now we saw the Indian Independence Act of 1947, and 100 years. It's almost 100 years. 2047 is coming within 20, I think, the 20-24 years. So government of India, especially the Prime Minister of India, Sri Narendra Modi, wants to put some targets to be achieved by the 2047. The first and foremost target is to see India as a developed country. So just now we saw the 1947 Act, and all of a sudden we are going to the future. So this is the beauty of UPSC preparation. We learn lessons from the past, and we interpret the past lessons to the present, and we will put some targets for the future. So that's why I took up this topic. There will be some linkage between that Government of India 1947. At the time, we don't have any constitution, we don't have any parliament, we don't have any clarity about our future, and around 500 princely states, 500 small territories were not yet merged into the India. At the time, the leadership of Jawaharlal Nehru and Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel took up it as a challenge. Yes, to be frank, Sardar Patel ji mostly integrated the whole nation, and today we have our own constitution, our own name, our own flag, our own credibility in the international diaspora. So proudly, Prime Minister of India from Red Fort in a speech of August 15th, 2023 gave us some targets. This comes under GS2, and news article for the references from the Indian Express. And the probable question is, the Prime Minister during his address from the ramparts of the Red Fort emphasized on the democracy and diversity, and set the goal of Vikasit Bharat by 2047. Comment with the focus on the probable challenges. Don't put your efforts on the what we achieved in the last 100 years, but put your most efforts on the probable challenges. This question can be taken as a voluntary. I want to give you any assignment. The interested people can write this question and can send to me. Keywords: STEM, Red Fort, democracy, golden era, prime minister, कर्तव्य काल, underemployment, Independence Day, हजार साल की गुलामी. So can anyone tell me the meaning of the term demography? Demography ante enti? Demography. Anyone? Demography.
Demography is the study of population, sir.
Yes, exactly. So what is meant by demographic dividend?
The advantage of the population means the population which is in the range of working age population, that is between 14 to 25 years, or 15 to 60 years.
Yeah, 15 to 60 years. Yes, exactly.
Compared to the remaining population, then we can call it as a demographic dividend.
Exactly. Demographic dividend means the working age population, that is the existing democracy. We need to make dividends out of it. Yeah, that was the challenge of present day. Yeah, by looking at these two pictures, you can understand what we are going to discuss about. This is Prime Minister Narendra Modi from the Red Fort of India on the August 15th, 2023. This is the official image circulated by the Government of India in the Amrut Kal Developed India Mission Vikasit Bharat Abhiyan. In these days, you need to learn the terminologies in Hindi also. In this slide, Hazar Saal ki Gulami. Hazar Saal means 1,000 years. Ki Gulami means slavery. We are under slaves, we are the subjects under Mughals for around 800 years. Under the Muslim rule, we are in 800 rules, and 200 years in the Britishers rule. So, Hazar Saal ki Gulami. Being 1,000 years subject to the foreign rule, some slave mindset or some colonial mindset is still existing within us. We feel inferior. Even some politicians always compare us with China, America. We are backward. We need to move forward, like that. So still some inferiority is there in our thought process. That's why Prime Minister of India wants to overcome that thought process, and he wants to see India as a developed nation by the 2047. So Hindi terminology also very, very important, because the present government is stressing the importance of three language formula. In the second language will be the national, which will be the largest spoken language of India, that is Hindi. So try to remember Hindi names also. Prime Minister's Independence Day address focused on three Ds. What are the three Ds? Demography, democracy, and diversity. What Deepthi ma'am said, that demography is the study of population. By studying the population of India, 60 to 70% of the population is young population. Majority of them are educated. Of course, some of them lacking their skills. So by giving health, education, and skills to the working age population, India can use this human capital as a basic resources to become a developed country. Democracy. Democracy also very, very important to become India a developed country, because democracy builds the trust within the nation, means the population within India can trust the government decisions by the successful implementation of democracy. And even outside the India, the foreign countries can encourage us, can trust us, the accountability, the transparency, the face value of India will increases by the successfully following the principles of democracy. And whenever there is a peace, prosperity will exist there. ఎక్కడైతే ప్రశాంతత ఉంటుందో అక్కడే ధనం అనేది ఉంటుంది. సో for that peace and prosperity, democracy is very, very important. You cannot expect peace and prosperity in autocratic countries like Afghanistan, Pakistan, and North Korea. And diversity, various religions, various castes, various languages, various food. The diversity is a real asset for India, because if you look at commercial point of view, the more diverse your market, the more profits the industry gets. Because if you eat only one kind of food, there will be market for only one kind of food. If you are eating different foods, different markets will be there. If you are wearing different clothes, different markets will be there. If you are following different ideologies, different kind of books and audio books, e-books, and the thought provoking institutions will be there. So the more diverse the country will be, the more diverse will be the economy. So these three things will be the pillars of India at the rate of 2047. The Prime Minister also mentioned three challenges. We have three assets called demography, democracy, and diversity. Three challenges also there: corruption, dynastic politics, and appeasement politics. Corruption. Yesterday, day before yesterday, in the discussion of One Nation, One Election, we discussed about for the 2019 general election, unofficially 60,000 crores were spent on the one single election. So you can understand the depth of corruption in India by this figure itself. Dynastic politics, be it in national politics or be it in local politics. Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, mainly in South India. In all South Indian states, chief ministers and chief ministers' sons were in powerful positions. And we also look at the appeasement politics. Mr. Udayanidhi Stalin's comment on Sanatan Dharma. So he wants to appease other section of the people. So he is making derogatory comments on some section of the people. Dynastic politics. He also example for the dynastic politics. And many people, even from all political parties, MPs, MLAs, chief ministers and their sons, when the senior leader is not getting ticket, he is requesting ticket for his son. For the sake of change, he wants to see his son as a MLA or MP. So corruption, dynastic politics, and appeasement politics are three big challenges for India. According to him, India was overcoming the ills of 1,000 years of slavery of the past and is now laying the foundation for a 1,000-year golden era. So till 1947, 1,000 years of the slavery we saw. Even this within the 75 years, foreign governments like USA, Russia, etc., etc., pressurized us in many events, like in Pokhran nuclear tests, even war with Pakistan, even the situation with Jammu and Kashmir. A lot of international pressure is there on our heads. So Prime Minister want to overcome all these injuries of past 1,000 years, and he expecting a 1,000-year golden era ahead. In an emerging and new world order, India would be playing a central role. He also said that India's unity across regions, communities, and gender the utmost priority for him. So, Prime Minister is expecting unity across regions, south, north, east, west, communities between different religions and different castes and gender, women empowerment, the utmost priority for him. So, from this slide, please note down the terms called demography, democracy, and diversity are the assets of India. Corruption, dynastic politics, and appeasement politics as the challenges for India. And the uh, main focus will be on the India's unity in components of region, community, and gender parity. So these things will be important, very, very important in the writing of essays also. Because at the end of the day, we are going to be future civil servants, and we need to be in synchronization with the persons who are in the chairs of president, prime minister, vice president, etc. We need to be in sync with the opinion of the government. Yes, we might have different of opinion, different of ideology in real life, but being an aspiring civil servant, we should follow the guidelines, we should follow the principles of the existing government in state and center. Towards the Amrit Kal, all of you know that 75 years of independence we are celebrating even from 2022. Hazar Sal ki Gulami, 1,000 years of slavery is the end of slavery. We are now in Amrit Kal, we are an independent country. So from now the Hazar Sal ki Gulami is ended, and Kartavya Kal, the time to perform some duty is going to start. In Kartavya Kal, we need to focus on the demography, democracy, and diversity. By the help of these three things, we need to work on building unity across the India in the name of region, community, and gender. We need to build the unity. By 2047, India becomes Vikasit or developed. This is his wish. The PM underlined India's samarthya, the capability, its aspirations and ambitions as it takes place as a decisive player and stabilizing force and Vishwamitra, friend to Earth. During even COVID-19 also, if you observe, no country supplied vaccines to the rest of the world like India. We supplied vaccines to nearly 154 countries out of 200 countries in this world. So more than two-thirds of the countries we covered, and the vaccine diplomacy was giving powerful fruits nowadays, because the G20 is going to start in within span of 1 week in the New Delhi. The whole world is believing India. The whole world is respecting our value system after the COVID-19, and the attitude of China and America is fueling more positivity towards the India. The PM identified three imperatives: reform, perform, and transform. So if something is there, something bad is there in electoral system, in governance, in democracy, we need to reform it. Suppose, for example, GST. Some evils are there in tax collection, so low tax is coming to the exchequer of the government. There is no progress in the tax collection. So the reform called GST come into the picture. Perform. To perform the reform, GST Council came into existence. Several portals, officials were in place. So we undertook a reform and we performed the reform, and our economy became transparent. Today, India is running with 7.8% of the GDP growth rate as per the recent IMF estimates, and India is the number one country in the world. Even USA, Germany, and other major economies are driving it 3%, 2%, and -1% GDP growth rate, but India is with the 7.8% growth rate. Yes, we cannot judge the governance solely based on the GDP. Human development indexes are there, per capita income is there, etc., will there. But in this Amrut Kal, if something, because if you feel India is having low per capita income or low human development index, we need to reform those sectors and we need to implement them, we need to perform them. By this reform and perform, the transformation in the Indian economy will be soon in reality. obstacles in achieving the 2047 dreams of developed India. So we have a good dream, but many obstacles are there. Underemployment problem, which allows you to transition from the farms to the industry. Unemployment is one problem, and underemployment is also there. In small farmland, 10 people, 20 people are getting employed, and nobody is showcasing their full skills. So underemployment problem also there in mostly in northern India and eastern India, states like Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. Madhya Pradesh. Women's labor force participation was still low. It was 24% in 2022, whereas global average is almost double, means 47%. But interestingly, there are more girls than boys in STEM. Can anyone elaborate the term STEM? STEM, STEM.
Science, technology, engineering, and maths.
Yes, correct. STEM means science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Once upon a time, in these four fields, there are very less number of girls in India, but now girls dominating the boys. But irony is, enrollment in higher education is very, very high, but labor force participation is very, very low. There are many problems like patriarchal mindset, sexual harassment at workplace, and the maternity problem, this menstruation cycle problems, and some other problems are there. We need to reform those problems. We need to perform the new initiatives, and we need to transform the gender equality. Trade policy, which has turned to protectionist, needs to be reset, as no country has become developed without using cross-border trade. Because in 2019, India declined the offer to join in ASEAN. If you read current affairs, our Prime Minister Narendra Modi was also there in ASEAN meeting yesterday. So talks are going on, but in 2019 we declined to join ASEAN because of the protest from farmer organizations across the Gujarat, Maharashtra, mostly from milk farmers. So if we join in ASEAN, the countries like Indonesia, Australia, who are with surplus milk, can flood our Indian markets with the cheap milk, and the local milk farmers will be in losses. So whatever it will be the reason, we didn't join the ASEAN. So we need to overcome the policies of protectionist mindsets. There are serious issues concerning education and skilling in India. More educated people are there, more engineers are there, more doctors are there, but skills among them is very low as per the demands of the market. So we need to upskill the existing labor force in India. Grand targets set for the next 25 years in the fields of education, health, skilling, and gender empowerment. Yes, education and health, everybody knows, even the group 2 aspirant also knows. For being a UPSC aspirant, we need to know the importance of the skilling. We need to study the government policies with respect to skills and gender empowerment. Beti Padhao, Beti Bachao, schemes like Sukanya Samruddhi Yojana. We need to study the schemes related to gender empowerment, skilling, health, because Prime Minister himself stressing these sectors in the Lec4 speech. So you can expect MCQs in prelims from the schemes related to these sectors. So please note down the sectors and work on it. Article 370, and this will be the second current affairs discussion in today's class. The burning issue, Article 370. Why I chosen this topic? Because 2 days before, the Supreme Court of India reserved its verdict on the restoration of Article 370 and Article 35A. So from August 2nd onwards, marathon hearing, almost 1 month marathon hearing took place, including some holidays. Both advocates from Jammu and Kashmir, Mr. Kapil Sibal and his council, his panel, and from government, the Attorney General, Solicitor General, and some other senior advocates, both sides gave their arguments. You can see those arguments in YouTube also. Live telecast was there, because Justice Chandrachud, the Chief Justice of India, is such a learned man. He's taking all inputs from the advocates. He's talking very politely. So if you have any free time, please go through these hearings. This comes under GS2, Constitution and Polity, and the reference news article is there. in 13th August from The Hindu. The question will be critically examine the legal issues before the Supreme Court after overturning the Article 370, which pertains to the Jammu and Kashmir. Critically examine the legal issues. So, the legal issues you should write from the point of Jammu and Kashmir, from the point of Government of India. Both sides you need to write in the Supreme Court after overturning. So, after August 5, 2019, facts you should write. Before that date facts, you need to write in very brief. Keywords you can see. Yeah. Circumstances in which Jammu and Kashmir acceded to India. So in 1947 Act, we saw, that's why I took up this article. In 1945 Act, the act gave liberty to the princely states. They can either join India or Pakistan or they can remain neutral. So Raja of Kashmir did not take any decision to whether join in India or Pakistan. Later, he was in opinion to become independent. But from 1947 August 14th to 1947 October, several infiltrations took place from the Pakistan side to the Indian side, from the Pakistan side to the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir. So Hari Singh requested Government of India to take action on the infiltration on October 26, 1947, and he is also know that without offering something to the Government of India will offer nothing to him. So naturally, they cannot send the help asked for without his state acceding to the dominion of India. If I did not accede my state to the dominion of India, they will never give me any help. Hence, he attached instrument of accession with the letter. However, it was not unconditional. So he wrote a letter on 26th October 1947 to the Government of India, that is India's Governor General. In that letter, he mentioned some conditions. With that conditions, he merged Jammu and Kashmir with India. In exchange, India offered protection to Jammu and Kashmir, but within the span of these 3 months, some area already occupied by the fringe elements from the Pakistan agents, ISI, Pakistan military, and the natural harbor of terrorists. Some portion was already occupied, that is today's POK, Pak occupied Kashmir, and the rest of the portion was survived by the Indian security forces. So the instruments of accession means the letter sent by the Raja Hari Singh to the Indian forces. Because Raja Hari Singh being a Hindu, his natural choice will be joining into India. Because irrespective of religions, India can make Jammu and Kashmir independent in certain issues. But if we offer the same offer to the Pakistan, Jammu and Kashmir will also become the part of larger Islamic Republic of Pakistan, and there will be no rights for either him or his public. So he chosen India with some conditions. Maharaja specified the matters on which India will have the powers. This will be under defense, foreign affairs, and communications. Only three things he wanted to surrender to the government of India, and rest of the things he wanted to keep them with the Jammu and Kashmir. While India was then ruled under the provisions of the Government of India Act 1935, Jammu and Kashmir have its own constitution since 1939. From 1935 to 1939, Constitutional Assembly was of Jammu and Kashmir was in place, and the constitution of the mini constitution for the territory of Jammu and Kashmir, except defense, foreign affairs, and communications, was in place. The instrument of accession, Hari Singh had laid down a condition that it cannot be altered unless he accepts the change. So, without his consent, you cannot amend the instrument of accession. But the fact is, without his permission, you cannot change the instrument of accession. But today, Hari Singh is no more. And today, the Constitutional Assembly of Jammu and Kashmir is no more. So we need to find out the inheritance of Raja Hari Singh, the inheritance of Constitutional Assembly. So in place of Hari Singh, the governor of Jammu and Kashmir was there in 5th August 2019. In the place of Constitutional Assembly of Jammu and Kashmir, state legislature was in place. So government of India took authority from the government in place of Hari Singh, governor in place of Constitutional Assembly of Jammu and Kashmir, the state legislature. So these all the abrogation of Article 370 took place with certain limitations. You cannot go back to Hari Singh and ask his permission. He's no more, right? So the entire debate starts from here only. When the Article 370 was adopted in the Constitutional Assembly, care was taken to see that it reflected the clauses and spirit of the instruments of accession. So this instrument of accession was given a formal form in the name of Article 370 in the Indian Constitution. Features of the 370 article and the items of union list and conquer list. The power of parliament to make laws for the state will be the limited to those matters that are corresponding to the instrument of accession. So even in union list and concurrent list, only defense, foreign affairs, and communication matters can be eligible to become acts in the Indian Parliament. In state list, if Parliament wants to make some laws in state list or any other items in the union list or concurrent list, they need to take the consultation of the state of Jammu and Kashmir. That consultation can be known as concurrence, because if the state government of Jammu and Kashmir is not in favor of any change other than defense, communications, and foreign affairs, etc., that change will not come into force in the Jammu and Kashmir. That's why before 2019, we used to study any act, Land Acquisition Act, GST Act, any act, star mark will be there, not applicable to the Jammu and Kashmir, except applicable to the Jammu and Kashmir. But now, from 2019 onwards, you never see any star mark, you never see the name of Jammu and Kashmir in special letters. Yeah. Article 1 and Article 370 itself made applicable to Jammu and Kashmir. So only Article 1, that is India, Union of States, within the Union of States, Jammu and Kashmir will be there in the place. And 370, those protections given an instrument of accession will be there. Except these two, the other articles will not be applicable for Jammu and Kashmir before 2019. However, the rest of the Constitution of India would be applicable only when you pass orders from the President of India from time to time. So number of orders were passed from the date of 26 October 2047 to 5th October 2019. If you want to implement any small change, you need a presidential order to make it applicable to the Jammu and Kashmir. The president could declare it inoperative if there is such a recommendation from the State Constituent Assembly. Yes, by using this point, on 5th August 2019, abrogation of Article 370 was taken place. In the place of State Constituent Assembly, when the state was under President rule, no Constituent Assembly will be there, no legislature will be there. So governor assumed all the charges, and governor recommended the president to declare this Article 370 as inoperative. Means Article 371 was removed from the Constitution of India. How was the special status removed? On 5th August 2019, President initially issued an order with the concurrence of the state government, means the state governor. As the state was under President rule, yes, we already discussed. The order stated that all the provisions of the Constitution of India, as amended from time to time, will be applicable to the Jammu and Kashmir. Instead of this provision, that provision, in August 5th, 2019 orders, the president declared that all the provisions of the Constitution of India will be applicable to the Jammu and Kashmir. Why? Because we are abrogating Article 370 with the concurrence of the state governor. It superseded the constitution application to the Jammu and Kashmir Order 1954. This order was scrapped, and the new order, which is clearly saying that all the provisions will be applicable to the Jammu and Kashmir in subsequent years. Crucial changes were also made to the definition of the Article 370. If you want to abrogate Article 370, first you need to amend the Article 367. In Article 367, it is very, very, very important. Please note down. Within the Article 367, this article describes how to interpret some terms in the Constitution. Except Article 367, from Article 1 to Article 400, etc., there are n number of articles By using Article 367, you can interpret the other articles of the Constitution. So the interpretation of other articles, you need to first amend the Article 367 itself. In the place of state constituent assembly, you need to write state legislature. In the place of harassing, you need to replace with the governor. So all references to the Sadar I Riyasit means the head of the Jammu and Kashmir, aid and advice of the Council of Ministers, all these terms replaced, and the governance concurrence will be equated to the state government's concurrence, and the Article 370 was abrogated. All references to state government shall mean to the governor, and most importantly, the references to the Constituent Assembly in the provision of Article 373 was amended to read Legislative Assembly of the state. Even that Legislative Assembly was not in place, so governor became the sole and ultimate authority. Yeah. The state bifurcated into two UTs, Ladakh and Jammu and Kashmir. Jammu and Kashmir with legislature, and Ladakh is the union territory without any legislature. The Article 370 declared as inoperative, that declared that all the provisions of the Constitution will apply to the Jammu and Kashmir. The legal issues before the Supreme Court. Whenever in August 5th, 2019, the Article 370 was abrogated, from the starting of 2020, petitions were there in the Supreme Court about the constitutionality of the abrogation, because many leaders from the Jammu and Kashmir were put behind the house arrest, and many military operations, many secret operations, rescue operations, the restoration of democratic process was in past phase. Some months internet was in shutdown. So many things were happened in Jammu and Kashmir. Meanwhile, some people approached the Supreme Court of India, but the status of Jammu and Kashmir had not been, is the status of Jammu and Kashmir is permanent or temporary. But interestingly, Justice Chandrachud in last week commented that Article 35A and Article 370, which are giving disproportionate rights to the local people, are discriminatory in nature to the non-local people. So we can guess the mood of judiciary by understanding this act. So I am not making any predictions. I am not making any comments on the judicial verdict, but these comments are making some positivity towards the 370. Whether the Constitutional Assembly effectively prevents the union government from unilaterally altering the state's relationship with India. This question also need to be heard by the Supreme Court. Whether 370 is permanent or temporary, this question also should be answered by the Supreme Court. Whether what was considered a temporary provision prior to the work of the state's Constituent Assembly had become permanent subsequently. The instrument of accession was temporary provision with the state of Jammu and Kashmir merged to the India, but suddenly it seems to be permanent in nature, because in last 70 years we extended the 370 by presidential orders. So there is a larger question that whether it is permanent or temporary, whether the government of India can abrogate it or not. So two main questions should be answered by the Supreme Court. And what was the present status of the case means 370 hearing was concluded and Supreme Court reserved its verdict. So Supreme Court gave a conclusion, but it was not there in public domain. Usually the meaning of reserving a verdict means, even in cases of TSPSC, APPSC, Supreme High Courts sometimes reserve the verdict. So reserve the verdict means the verdict already came, it was there in sealed covers, but due to prevailing situation, due to existing situation, if the verdict comes out into the picture, some disturbance, there is a chance for disturbances within the country. So it was there in sealed covers. Usually in between 2 months, 1 month and 2 months, the verdict can come into the public domain and we would know the reality. Yeah. Thank you very much. And it's your time to ask the doubts. There any doubts?
No, sir.
Yeah, no doubts. And yesterday I received.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. I received 2 answer copies from 2 students. Sucharita and Deepthi. And I expect more number of students will take part in future classes, future assignments. It is better if you write and submit the assignments on time to correct yourself, to check yourself, and to practice more answers in futures. You need to start at least by 1 or 3 answers in a single day. All of a sudden, you can't deal with the 20 answers in 3 hours. So it is better if you start by next assignments. And I already told, if anyone wants to write answer on 2000 Develop India 2047 question, you can write and submit to me. Yeah. Thank you very much. Still any doubts?
No, sir. You given supreme clarity.
Okay, thank you. So we can conclude the class now itself. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.